The massive ships appeared in Earth's sky without warning. They were bigger than anything humans had ever built. The metal hulls stretched for miles across the blue atmosphere. People on every continent stopped what they were doing and looked up in fear and wonder. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was a tall creature with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. His species, the Kethmari, had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Today would be number 48. Begin the announcement, he told his communications officer. The message went out on every radio frequency, every television channel, every internet connection on Earth. The translation was perfect, fed through computers that have been studying human languages for decades. People of Earth, the voice said, you are now part of the galactic hegemony. Your planet has been classified as a slave world. Your species will serve the greater good of the galaxy. In the United Nations building in New York, delegates sat in shocked silence. The Secretary General, Maria Santos, felt her hand shake as she gripped the podium. This cannot be real, whispered the Russian ambassador. But it was real. The alien ships hung in the sky like metal clouds, blocking out the sun in some places. Their weapons could be seen glowing beneath their hulls. Weapons that could turn mountains into glass. Admiral Zethkar had studied the humans for a long time. His science teams had watched their wars, counted their weapons, measured their technology. The humans were still using chemical rockets to barely reach their own moon. Their most powerful bombs were laughable compared to what the hegemony possessed. Their planet was dying from pollution and climate change. Their nations fought each other over resources and old grudges. They were perfect slaves, desperate enough to accept help, weak enough to control. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we are detecting movement from their military forces. Zethkar's 4 eyes focused on the display screens. Human aircraft were rising to meet his fleet. Tiny fighter jets and bombers, moving like insects against his massive ships. Let them come, he said with what humans would call a smile. It will be a good demonstration. The human pilots knew they were probably flying to their deaths. Captain Sarah Chun of the U.S. Air Force had volunteered for the first wave. As she climbed toward the alien ships, she thought about her daughter back home. About all the children who would grow up as slaves if this failed. All wings, this is Blue Leader, she said into her radio. Remember, we're not trying to win. We're trying to show these things that we won't go quietly. The first human missiles struck the alien shields and disappeared in flashes of light. The energy barriers around the ships flickered but held strong. The aliens fired back with beams of pure energy that turned the human aircraft into vapor. But more kept coming. From every military base on Earth, everything that could fly was launched. Old cargo planes loaded with explosives flew alongside the newest stealth fighters. Civilian pilots in crop dusters and private jets joined the attack. It was hopeless, but they did it anyway. Admiral Zethkar watched the slaughter with growing unease. His weapons were destroying the human aircraft easily, but there were so many of them. And they kept coming even when it was clear they could not win. Admiral, his science officer, spoke up. This behavior is unusual. How so? In our previous conquests, the native species would surrender once they saw our superior firepower. Or they would send their best warriors in organized formations. These humans are throwing everything they have at us, including civilians. Zethkar looked at the tactical display. Red dots representing human aircraft covered the screen like a rash. They were not fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like cornered animals. No matter, he said. Begin the harvest. The harvest ships were smaller than the warships, but still enormous by human standards. They descended toward the major cities, their tractor beams reaching out to grab buildings and vehicles and people. New York was the first target. The massive beam of energy reached down from the sky and began lifting everything in its path. Cars, buses, and entire city blocks rose into the air, but the humans did not run. Police officers and firefighters stayed at their posts, trying to help people escape, even as the alien beam pulled at them. National Guard units fired their weapons at the harvest ships until the last possible moment. Civilians formed human chains to pull each other away from the beam's reach. Maria Santos stood on the roof of the UN building as it began to rise into the air. She could have fled, but she stayed at the podium with her translator, broadcasting to the world. To all nations of Earth, she said as the building lifted higher, "We are not defeated. We are not slaves. Fight them with everything you have. Make them pay for every life they take." The signal cut off as the building disappeared into the alien ship. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In London, the Queen refused to leave Buckingham Palace. In Moscow, the president armed himself and fought alongside his bodyguards. In Beijing, millions of people poured into the streets, not to surrender, but to throw rocks and bottles at the alien ships. Admiral Zethkar received reports from all his harvest commanders. The collection was proceeding, but slowly. Much more slowly than expected. "The humans are interfering with the tractor beams," one commander reported. "They are using explosives to collapse buildings before we can lift them. They are destroying their own infrastructure rather than let us have it. And the specimens we have collected are problematic," another added. "They refuse to be processed. They attack the guards. Some have killed themselves rather than submit." Zethkar's confidence began to crack. In 47 previous conquests, the native species had been grateful when the killing stopped. They had cooperated with the harvest, hoping to earn better treatment. These humans seemed to prefer death to slavery. "Double the guard on the specimen holds," he ordered, "and increase the pace of collection. I want this planet stripped clean within the week." But even as he gave the orders, Zethkar felt something he had never felt before during a conquest. He felt uneasy. The humans were weak, their technology primitive, their planet dying. But they fought with a fury that disturbed him. It reminded him of stories his grandmother had told him as a child. Stories about creatures that were more dangerous when wounded than when healthy. Creatures that would tear their own limbs off to escape a trap. He dismissed the feeling and focused on his duty. Earth would fall, like all the others. The humans would learn their place in the galactic order. He had no way of knowing that the real war had not yet begun. The problems began almost immediately after the first harvest ships landed on Earth's surface. Commander Vextal had overseen dozens of planetary harvests before. His job was simple: collect the strongest specimens for labor, eliminate the weak, and establish order among the new slaves. It had never taken more than a few days. 3 weeks after landing, he was still fighting street by street, through what the humans called London. Status report. He barked into his communicator as another explosion shook his command. Post. Sector 7 is still contested. Came the reply from Captain Yorthka. The humans have fortified their underground transport system. Every tunnel is trapped with explosives. We clear one section and they attack from behind. Vextal looked at his tactical display with growing frustration. The red areas showing human resistance should have been shrinking. Instead, they seemed to be growing. His forces controlled the main buildings and roads, but the humans controlled everything else. What about the specimens we have collected? Are they providing useful intelligence? That is problematic, sir. Vextal felt his blood temperature rise. Explain. The humans refuse to cooperate under interrogation. We have tried pain stimulation, fear conditioning, and reward systems. Nothing works. They either say nothing or give us false information. This was wrong. All wrong. In every previous harvest, there had always been collaborators. Weak individuals who would trade information for better treatment. Leaders who would surrender to save their people. Someone who would help establish order, not the humans. They seemed to have no concept of reasonable surrender. A new report crackled through his communicator. "Sir, this is Harvest Team 12. We've encountered another anomaly." "What kind of anomaly?" "We found a group of young humans in an educational facility. When we moved to collect them, the adult humans attacked us with primitive weapons and explosive devices. They fought to the death to protect the younglings." Vextel paused. "The adults sacrificed themselves for offspring that were not their own?" "Yes, sir." "And the younglings?" "They did not run when the adults fell. They continued fighting with improvised weapons." This violated everything Vextel knew about civilized behavior. Adults protecting their own young was normal. But protecting the young of others, and young fighting instead of fleeing, suggested a level of group loyalty that bordered on mental illness. "Sir," another voice interrupted. "Medical team reporting. We need to discuss the human specimens." Dr. Melteran was the fleet's chief zoobiologist. She had studied hundreds of species and thought she understood the basic patterns of intelligent life. The humans were breaking all of her theories. "The humans are physically much more resilient than we expected," she reported to Vextel. "Their bone density is extreme. Their muscle fibers are designed for explosive movement. Their cardiovascular system can function under tremendous stress. That explains why they fight so hard," Vextel said. "They are naturally aggressive." "No, sir, that's not correct. They are not naturally aggressive in the way we understand it. They are naturally adaptive. Their brains show incredible flexibility under stress. They learn from each encounter and adjust their tactics." She brought up a holographic display showing human brain scans. "Look at this. When we capture a human, their brain activity increases rather than decreases. They are constantly processing information, looking for weaknesses, planning escapes. And their pain tolerance is beyond anything we have recorded. We had to increase our interrogation equipment settings by 300% just to get their attention." Vextel studied the data with growing concern. "What are you saying, Doctor?" "I'm saying we may have made a fundamental error in classification. These humans are not a slave species. They are a predator species that happens to be technologically behind us." The implications hit Vextel like a physical blow. Predator species were never harvested. They were either allied with or eliminated entirely. There was no middle ground. "That's impossible," he said. "Look at their planet. They fight among themselves constantly. They poison their own air and water. They cannot even unite their own species." "Sir," Dr. Melteran said carefully, "what if that behavior is not a sign of weakness? What if it is training?" Before Vextel could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the command ship. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red. "Report," Vextel shouted. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the outer system. Something is approaching fast." The main display screen lit up with sensor data. Dozens of objects were moving toward Earth from the asteroid belt and the outer planets. They were moving too fast to be natural objects, but they did not match any known human technology. Admiral Zethkar appeared on the communication screen from his flagship in orbit. His 4 eyes were wide with concern. "Commander Vextel, what is your assessment of the surface situation?" "The harvest is proceeding, but resistance is much stronger than anticipated. Admiral, we may need to revise our classification of this species." "That may not be necessary," Zethkar said grimly. "We have a larger problem. Long-range sensors are detecting incoming vessels. Hundreds of them. Human reinforcements? That's impossible. We monitored their space capabilities for decades. They have barely left their own moon. That's what we thought. But these ships are not coming from Earth. They are coming from throughout the system. Hidden bases, asteroid mining operations, deep space stations that we never detected. The tactical officer's voice cut through the conversation. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the incoming fleet. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was human, but calm and cold in a way that made Vextel's skin crawl. Attention Galactic Hegemony Forces. This is Admiral Rachel Morrison, commanding the Soul Defense Network. You have 30 minutes to release all human prisoners and withdraw from Earth orbit. After that time, we will begin shooting. Zethkar's translator worked frantically to process the human's words. Soul Defense Network? Admiral Morrison, our records show no such organization. The human woman's laughter was not pleasant. Your records are incomplete. We've been watching you watch us for a very long time. Did you really think a species that survived ice ages and asteroid impacts would put all their eggs in one basket? Vextel felt his confidence evaporating. Admiral, request permission to accelerate the harvest. If there are hidden human forces, we need to... Commander, the human voice interrupted. Let me save you some time. Your ground forces are surrounded. Your ships are outnumbered. And every day you stay makes things worse for you. You're bluffing, Zethkar replied. Our ships are superior to anything you could build. Are they? Let's find out. The communication ended. Within minutes, the first human ships entered visual range. They looked nothing like the primitive rockets the hegemony had observed. These vessels were sleek, dark, and moved with a precision that spoke of advanced technology and experienced crews. Admiral, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. These ships, they're armed with weapons we don't recognize. The energy signatures are completely unknown. Zethkar stared at the approaching fleet with growing horror. For decades, they had watched Earth. They had seen the wars, the pollution, the chaos. They had assumed it was a dying civilization, barely clinging to life on a single world. They had been watching a decoy. Dr. Meltaran's voice echoed through the command center. What if that behavior is not a sign of weakness? What if it is training? The humans had not been failing to unite. They had been practicing. Every war, every conflict, every struggle had been preparation for this moment. While the visible human civilization on Earth drew attention, the real human empire had been growing in secret throughout the solar system. And now that empire was coming to collect its people, Vextel looked at his tactical display one more time. The red zones of human resistance on Earth's surface suddenly looked different. Not like desperate last stands, but like coordinated holding actions. The humans on the ground had not been trying to win. They had been buying time. All units, he broadcast to his ground forces, prepare for immediate extraction. The situation has changed. As the first human warships opened fire, Vextel realized that everything they thought they knew about humanity had been wrong. These were not primitives to be enslaved. They were something much more dangerous. They were survivors who had learned to plan ahead. Admiral Rachel Morrison watched the alien fleet through the bridge windows of her flagship, the UNS Retribution. She had been born on Ceres Station 43 years ago and had never set foot on Earth. But like all humans in the outer colonies, she knew exactly what the blue planet meant to her people. Home, the cradle, the place where humanity began its journey to the stars. And now aliens had dared to call her people slaves. Status. Report, she said to her tactical officer. 247 human vessels are in position. Lieutenant Commander Singh replied. Mining ships from the asteroid belt, patrol craft from the Jupiter moons, deep space exploration vessels, and our full military fleet. The aliens appear to have 86 ships of various sizes. Morrison nodded. The numbers looked good. The numbers were not everything. The alien ships were larger and had better defensive systems. This would not be an easy fight. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication station. "We're receiving a transmission from the alien flagship." "Put it through." The face that appeared on the screen was unlike anything most humans had ever seen. Admiral Zethkar had 4 eyes, skin like polished granite, and a mouthful of teeth that looked designed for tearing meat. "Admiral Morrison," the alien said through his translation system, "I propose a negotiation. We will withdraw our harvest operations from your planet. In return, you will allow us to leave this system peacefully." Morrison studied the alien's face for a long moment. Behind her, the bridge crew waited in absolute silence. "Negotiation," she said finally. "That's an interesting word coming from someone who showed up uninvited to steal my people. Your species was classified as suitable for labor under galactic law 847.3. We were following established protocols. Morrison's voice was flat and cold. "Let me tell you about human protocols, Admiral. When someone threatens our children, we don't negotiate. We eliminate the threat." Zethkar's 4 eyes narrowed. "You are outnumbered by the greater galactic community. Earth is one small world among thousands. If you resist, more fleets will come." Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Let them come." The transmission ended. Captain Sarah Okafor commanded the mining vessel Heavy Lifter. It was not a warship, just a converted asteroid processor with engines that could push mountains through space. But today, it would serve a different purpose. "All civilian vessels," Morrison's voice came through the fleet communication system, "you know your targets. The aliens think we're primitives because we use kinetic weapons. Let's show them why momentum is still the most fundamental force in the universe." The Heavy Lifter and dozens of other mining ships had been loaded with processed iron and nickel from the asteroid belt. Thousands of tons of metal, accelerated to incredible speeds by engines, designed to move planetary bodies. The alien ships fired their energy weapons as the human fleet approached. Beams of coherent light that could vaporize mountains struck the human vessels. But the humans had learned from watching alien technology for decades. Their ships were covered in ablative armor and reflective surfaces that scattered the energy beams. More importantly, the human ships were expendable. Every vessel in the fleet had been built with one purpose: to get close enough to the alien ships to hurt them. The first salvo of kinetic projectiles struck the alien fleet like a hammer blow. Chunks of processed metal moving at tremendous speed punched through energy shields and armor plating that had never been designed to stop solid projectiles. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Zethkar watched in horror as 3 of his cruisers simply disappeared in explosions of vaporized metal. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his science officer. "Admiral, their weapons are completely kinetic. Solid projectiles accelerated to extreme velocities. Our shields are designed to deflect energy weapons, not physical impacts, then adapt the shields. Sir, that would require a complete reconfiguration of our defensive systems. It would take hours. Hours they did not have." The human fleet was already launching a second wave of attacks, but the humans were taking losses too. The alien energy weapons were devastating any ship they could focus fire on. The UN's Defiance, a patrol ship from Europa, took a direct hit and simply ceased to exist. The mining vessel New Horizon lost its engine section and went spinning into the void. Morrison watched her people die and felt something cold settle in her chest. Every loss was a friend, a colleague, someone she had trained with or shared meals with. The outer colonies were small communities where everyone knew everyone. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving distress signals from Earth. The aliens are accelerating their ground operations." On the planet below, Commander Vextal had received new orders from Admiral Zethkar. With the human fleet engaging the orbital ships, There was no time for a careful harvest. The ground forces were to collect as many specimens as possible and prepare for immediate departure. But the humans on Earth had other plans. Marcus Webb had been a construction foreman before the aliens arrived. Now he was something else entirely. He stood in the ruins of downtown Chicago, surrounded by a makeshift army of police, firefighters, construction workers, and ordinary citizens who had picked up weapons. "Listen up," he shouted over the sound of alien aircraft overhead. "Those ships up there are fighting for us. Our job down here is simple. Make sure the aliens can't take anyone else." The plan was desperate but effective. Every major city had been evacuated into the underground systems, subways, storm drains, utility tunnels, abandoned mines. The humans had turned their own cities into traps. When the alien harvest ships came down to collect more people, they found only empty buildings rigged with explosives. And when they tried to follow the humans underground, they found themselves in a nightmare of booby traps and ambush. Sergeant Kim Patel had been with the British Special Air Service before the invasion. Now she led a mixed group of soldiers and civilians through the London Underground, striking at alien patrols and disappearing before they could respond. "The key is mobility," she explained to her team as they prepared another ambush. "We know these tunnels better than they do. We hit them hard, kill as many as we can, and vanish. Make them afraid to leave their ships." The tactics were working. The alien ground forces found themselves trapped in urban warfare against an enemy that refused to fight fair. Every building could hide snipers. Every sewer entrance could conceal a bomb. Every civilian could be carrying weapons. Commander Vestal's carefully planned harvest operation was falling apart. His troops were taking casualties in every engagement, and the specimens they managed to collect were minimal compared to their losses. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "Admiral Zethkar is ordering immediate evacuation. The orbital battle is not going well. In space, Admiral Morrison's fleet was paying a terrible price for every alien ship destroyed. But they were winning. The human ships moved with a coordination that spoke of long practice and careful planning. They used the asteroids and debris fields as cover, striking from unexpected angles and vanishing before the aliens could retaliate effectively. Most importantly, they fought with a fury that the aliens had never encountered. Human pilots rammed their ships into alien vessels when their weapons ran out. Damaged human ships continued fighting even when their hulls were breached and their crews were dying. Admiral Lieutenant Commander Singh reported, "The alien flagship is trying to retreat." Morrison looked at the tactical display. The alien fleet was indeed pulling back, but slowly and in good order. Too many of her people had died to let the aliens escape clean. "All ships," she broadcast. "Primary objective is rescue of Earth survivors. Secondary objective is ensuring these aliens never come back." The UN's Retribution and her escort ships accelerated toward the alien flagship. The Eternal Dominion was massive and heavily armed, but it was also damaged from the kinetic bombardment and outnumbered. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Zethkar faced a decision he had never had to make in 47 previous conquests. For the first time in his career, he was losing. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, "the human flagship is closing on our position. They're charging weapons." Zethkar looked at the display screen showing the approaching human ship. It was smaller than his vessel, built for function rather than intimidation. But it moved with a purpose that chilled him. These humans did not fight for territory or resources or political advantage. They fought for something he was only beginning to understand. They fought for each other. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "General, retreat. Abandon the harvest." But even as his ships began their escape from the Sol system, Admiral Zethkar knew that this was not over. The humans had revealed themselves now. The galaxy would know that there was a predator species hiding in this small corner of space, and the galaxy would have to decide what to do about it. As the last alien ship disappeared into hyperspace, Admiral Morrison began the long task of rescuing human survivors from Earth and counting their losses. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. The humans had announced themselves to the galaxy in the most violent way possible. There would be consequences. The Galactic Council Chamber was a vast sphere of polished crystal that floated in the zero gravity at the center of Nexus Prime. Representatives from hundreds of species had gathered for an emergency session. Their various forms of breathing apparatus, creating a symphony of hisses and clicks in the artificial atmosphere. High Counselor Ithlara called the assembly to order with a pulse of bioluminescent light from her tentacled body. As the eldest member of the council, she had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. She had never seen the chamber so filled with fear. "We are here to address the failure of the Sol System harvest and the emergence of what appears to be a previously unknown military force," she announced. Admiral Zethkar will provide his report. The Kethmari Admiral's image appeared in the center of the chamber. He looked older than when he had departed for Earth. His stone-like skin cracked with stress lines. "Honorable Counselors," he began, "I must report that Harvest Operation 847.3 has ended in complete failure. The species designated as human has proven to be misclassified." A ripple of concerned sounds echoed through the chamber. Harvest operations had never failed completely. Some took longer than others, required more resources, but they always succeeded eventually. "Define misclassified," said Counselor Rexstick, whose insectoid species controlled 12 sectors. Zethkar's 4 eyes dimmed with what humans would recognize as shame. "The humans are not a primitive slave species, as our scouts reported. They are a technologically advanced predator species that has been deliberately hiding their capabilities." "Impossible," screeched Counselor Hithron, a bird-like creature whose species specialized in intelligence gathering. "We monitored their planet for over 50 of their years. We saw their wars, their pollution, their inability to cooperate even among themselves. With respect, Counselor, we saw what they wanted us to see. While we watched their homeworld, they were building a hidden empire throughout their star system. Mining operations in asteroid fields, research stations on outer planets, military bases on dead moons. All completely concealed from our sensors." The chamber erupted in alarmed chatter. How was it possible for an entire civilization to hide from the most advanced intelligence services in the galaxy? High Counselor Ithlara pulsed for silence. "Admiral, describe their military capabilities." Zethkar hesitated before answering. "They use kinetic weapons almost exclusively. Solid projectiles accelerated to tremendous velocities. Our energy shields are useless against such attacks. Kinetic weapons are primitive technology." Counselor Rexstick clicked dismissively. "Any species can throw rocks." "These were not rocks, Counselor. They were precisely manufactured projectiles weighing thousands of tons, moving at speeds that approach 10% of light velocity. When they impact a ship, there is no ship left to salvage." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy's military technology had evolved to use energy weapons because they were more efficient and easier to control. Physical projectiles were considered wasteful and primitive. But the humans had turned that assumption into a deadly advantage. "How many ships did you lose?" asked High Counselor Ithlara. 37 vessels completely destroyed. 22 more severely damaged. Out of my original fleet of 86 ships. The numbers were staggering. In 47 previous harvests, Admiral Zethkar had lost fewer than 10 ships total. And the harvest itself? We collected fewer than 50,000 specimens before being forced to retreat. Most were recovered by the humans during our withdrawal. Council of Rexstick's mandibles clicked with agitation. This is unacceptable. No single species can be allowed to resist the galactic hegemony. If the humans are permitted to defy us, others will follow their example. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The stability of galactic civilization depended on the understanding that resistance was futile. If that changed, everything would collapse into chaos. What do you propose? High Counselor Ithlara asked. A punishment fleet. Council of Rexstick replied without hesitation. 500 ships from a dozen species. We glass their entire system and serve notice to the galaxy that rebellion has consequences. Seconded, said Counselor Hithron. The human species must be eliminated completely. We cannot allow their defiance to inspire others. But as the Council debated the formation of a punishment fleet, events were already moving beyond their control. Captain Lisa Jiang had been born on Titan Station and trained as a deep space reconnaissance pilot. For the past 5 years, she had been serving the most classified unit of the human military, the ones who watched the Watchers dot her ship. The Unshadow was one of 12 vessels designed for long-range infiltration missions. It was smaller than a shuttle, but equipped with stealth technology that made it effectively invisible to galactic sensors. She had been following galactic hegemony ships for years, mapping their trade routes, studying their technology, and most importantly, learning their weaknesses. Control, this is Shadow 7, she transmitted to Earth. I have eyes on the Council meeting. They're planning a massive retaliation fleet. The response came from Admiral Morrison herself. Understood, Shadow 7? Estimated timeline? They're talking about 500 ships from multiple species. Assembly time. Maybe 2 months. Copy that. Continue surveillance and prepare for Phase 2. Phase 2 was the part of the human plan that even Admiral Morrison hoped they would never have to use. For decades, while the galaxy watched Earth, human infiltrators had been traveling throughout galactic space. Not as conquerors or spies, but as something much more dangerous. His friends. Dr. Alex Petrov had spent 15 years on the Rexstick homeworld, studying their insectoid biology under the guise of academic exchange. The Rexstick were proud of their scientific achievements and eager to share with other species. They had no idea that Dr. Petrov was actually a human military biologist. He had learned everything about Rexstick physiology, including their one critical weakness. Like many insect species, they were vulnerable to specific protein toxins that could disrupt their nervous systems. When the activation signal came from Earth, Dr. Petrov was ready. The bioweapon he released into the Rexstick capital's water supply was precisely tailored to their genetic structure. It would be harmless to any other species, but absolutely lethal to the Rexstick. Within hours, the entire planetary government was dead. Similar attacks happened simultaneously across the galaxy. Human infiltrators who had spent years building relationships, gaining trust, and learning secrets struck at the same moment. On the Hithran homeworld, Lieutenant Sarah Park activated a computer virus she had spent 3 years designing. It spread through their entire information network in minutes, crashing their economy and their ability to communicate with their colonies. On the Kethmari military headquarters planet, Sergeant Mike O'Connor used his position as a cultural exchange officer to detonate a series of precisely placed explosives that destroyed their main shipyards. Across the galaxy, critical infrastructure failed, governments collapsed, and military forces found themselves blind and leaderless. In the Galactic Council chamber, High Counselor Ithlara received the first emergency reports with growing horror. The Rexstick homeworld has gone silent, her communications officer reported. No response to any signals. The Hithran Sector Command is reporting complete system failures across their entire network. Kethmari Military Command is requesting emergency assistance. Their shipyards have been destroyed. The reports kept coming. Species after species reporting catastrophic failures, terrorist attacks, system-wide breakdowns, all happening at exactly the same time. How is this possible? Counselor Hithron screeched, his feathers standing on end. How could so many critical failures happen simultaneously? The answer came in a transmission from Earth that reached every functioning communication system in the galaxy. Admiral Rachel Morrison's image appeared in the council chamber. She was wearing her full dress uniform and looked directly into the camera with cold, steady eyes. "Members of the Galactic Council," she said, "this is Admiral Morrison of the Soul Defense Network. Your forces attempted to enslave our people. We consider this an act of war." High Counselor Ithlara felt her tentacles go rigid with fear. "Admiral Morrison, surely we can negotiate." "We tried negotiation," Morrison interrupted. "Your Admiral Zethkar rejected our offer of peaceful withdrawal. So now we're speaking the only language you seem to understand. You are one species among hundreds," Counselor Hithron protested. "You cannot fight the entire galaxy." Morrison smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "We're not fighting the galaxy, Counselor. We are the galaxy. For 50 years, we've been living among you, learning from you, becoming your friends and colleagues and trusted advisors. How do you think we learned so much about your military capabilities?" The terrible truth began to dawn on the council members. The humans had not just been hiding on the outskirts of galactic civilization. They had been infiltrating it. "Every world, every station, every ship in your space has humans on it," Morrison continued. "They've been there for decades, preparing for this day. And now that you've threatened our homeworld, they have their orders. What do you want?" High Counselor Ithlara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What we want," Morrison said, "is very simple. You leave humanity alone. Forever. 6 months after the failed harvest of Earth. The galaxy was dying. High Counselor Ithlara floated in the ruins of what had once been the most magnificent conference chamber in known space. The crystal walls were cracked and darkened, life support systems failing, and half the delegate positions empty forever. The Rextic homeworld was silent. An entire species of 12 billion individuals simply gone. The bioweapon the humans had unleashed was so precisely targeted that it left their cities intact but their streets filled only with empty shells. The Hithran had survived, but their civilization had not. Without their information networks, their far-flung colonies could not coordinate trade or defense. Pirates and warlords picked off their outer worlds while their core systems struggled with economic collapse and civil war. The Kethmari military machine, once the backbone of galactic hegemony enforcement, was crippled. Their shipyards destroyed, their command structure decapitated. Their remaining fleets scattered and demoralized. And still the humans were not finished. "Counselor," her aide whispered, "we're receiving another transmission from the Sol system." Idlara's tentacles drooped with exhaustion. Every communication from the humans brought news of another species brought low, another government toppled, another trade route severed. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the cracked display screen. She looked exactly the same as she had 6 months ago. But somehow the calm in her eyes had become even more frightening. "High Counselor," Morrison said with polite formality, "I thought you should know that the Zeftai have agreed to our terms." The Zeftai had been one of the few species to maintain neutrality in the growing conflict. Their merchant fleets carried goods throughout the galaxy, and their banks financed trade across hundreds of worlds. If they had surrendered to human demands, what terms? Ithlara asked, though she suspected she already knew. Complete withdrawal from all human-claimed systems. Recognition of human sovereignty. And most importantly, they've agreed to stop using slave labor entirely. "The economy will collapse," Ithlara protested weakly. "Half the galaxy's infrastructure depends on forced labor." Morrison nodded. Yes, it will. That's the point. The revelation of human infiltration had led to a galaxy-wide witch hunt as species tried to identify and eliminate human agents. But it was already too late. The humans had not just infiltrated governments and militaries. They had become part of them. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been the chief medical officer on the Yithkan homeworld for 20 years. The Yithkan trusted her completely, which made it easy when she convinced them to accept a new vaccination program for their children. The vaccine was real and effective against a dozen common diseases. It also contained a genetic marker that would make the Yithkan completely sterile if they ever attacked human space. "We're not monsters," she explained in her final transmission before evacuating. "Your children will live full, healthy lives. They just won't be able to have children of their own unless you keep the peace." Professor James Kim had taught galactic history at the University of Nexus Prime for 15 years. His students loved him for his passionate lectures about the rise and fall of civilizations. None of them suspected that he was rewriting their textbooks in real time, gradually changing the historical narrative to make human values seem more reasonable and attractive. When the crisis began, half of his former students were already in positions of influence throughout the Galactic Council bureaucracy. They carried his ideas with them, spreading human concepts of individual rights and species autonomy like a philosophical virus. Captain Maria Santos had spent a decade as a shipping coordinator in the Galactic Commerce Authority. She knew exactly which trade routes were critical to which species, which resources flowed where, and what would happen if those flows were suddenly interrupted. When she activated the computer, viruses she had been quietly installing for years, she did not destroy the galactic economy. She redirected it. Critical shipments began arriving late or at the wrong destinations. Payment systems developed glitches that always seemed to favor human-friendly species. Trade agreements mysteriously disappeared from computer databases. But perhaps the most devastating attack came from someone whose existence the Galaxy Council had never suspected. Admiral Morrison received a priority transmission from Agent Phoenix, humanity's highest-placed asset in the galactic government. "Admiral," the familiar voice said, "it's time for the final phase." For 30 years, Agent Phoenix had been the Galactic Council's most trusted military advisor. They had guided strategy decisions, recommended resource allocations, and helped plan the expansion that had brought slavery to a dozen new species. They had also been feeding every piece of information back to Earth. "Understood, Phoenix. Execute Operation Prometheus." Agent Phoenix walked into High Counselor Ithlara's private office as they had done thousands of times before. The counselor looked up from her displays, showing the latest reports of system failures and economic collapse. "Phoenix," she said wearily, "please tell me you have some good news." "I do have news," Agent Phoenix replied, removing their translation device and speaking in perfect human English for the first time in 3 decades. "Though I doubt you'll find it good." Ithlara's tentacles went rigid with shock. You're human." "Yes, and I've been sending every military secret, every strategic plan, every weakness of every species in the galaxy back to Earth since before you were born." The High Counselor's breathing apparatus wheezed as her respiratory system struggled with the shock. "That's impossible. Phoenix has been with the Council for 30 years. We scanned you, tested you, verified your genetic structure." Agent Phoenix smiled sadly. "Genetic modification, surgical alteration, biochemical enhancement, and 30 years of the best acting classes Earth had to offer. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." "Why?" Ithlara whispered. "Why would you do this to us?" "Because someone had to be ready for this day," Phoenix replied. "When you came to enslave our people, did you think we would just accept it? Did you think there would be no consequences? Phoenix activated a small device that had been hidden in the council chambers for years. The master computer core that controlled everything from life support to communications began systematically wiping itself clean. "This isn't over," Iflara said desperately. "There are still species that resist you. The Outer Rim territories, the isolationist worlds, the deep space nomads. They'll never surrender." "You're right," Phoenix agreed. "Some species will never accept human terms. They'll fight to the end, go down with their ships, die as free beings rather than live under our rules." Iflara felt a moment of hope. If some species would resist, perhaps the galaxy could still be saved. "We respect that choice," Phoenix continued, crushing that hope. "Those species will be left alone to live or die as they choose. But they'll do it on dead worlds, cut off from galactic civilization, with no trade, no communication, and no technology more advanced than what they can build themselves. And the rest of us? The rest of you will adapt. Learn to live without slave labor. Learn to treat other species as equals instead of resources. Learn to ask permission instead of taking what you want." Phoenix moved toward the exit, then paused. "High Counselor, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Many of your people are good individuals who never wanted to hurt anyone. But your civilization was built on the suffering of others. It was always going to end this way eventually." As Phoenix left, Iflara was alone with the dying displays and failing life support. Around her, the last functioning government in the galaxy was collapsing just like all the others. 3 years later, the transformation was complete. The galactic hegemony was gone. In its place was a loose confederation of independent species, each governing their own worlds according to their own values. Trade happened through negotiation rather than conquest. Disputes were settled through diplomacy rather than force. Some species thrived under the new system. Others struggled to adapt. A few had retreated to isolated corners of the galaxy, rebuilding their civilizations from scratch without human influence. Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, looking out at Earth through the transparent aluminum windows. The blue planet looked exactly as it had before the aliens came, but everything else had changed. "Admiral," her aide reported, "the Kethmari delegation has arrived for the trade negotiations." Morrison nodded. Admiral Zethkar had requested a meeting personally. The former Hegemony Fleet commander now governed one of the few remaining Kethmari worlds, trying to build a new society from the ashes of the old one. "Any weapons detected in their diplomatic party?" "No, Admiral. They've been very careful to follow all protocols." Morrison allowed herself a small smile. 3 years ago, the idea of alien species asking permission to enter human space would have been unthinkable. Now it was routine. She made her way to the conference room where Zethkar was waiting. The former admiral looked older, his stone-like skin marked with stress fractures, and his 4 eyes dimmed with what humans would recognize as regret. "Admiral Morrison," he said formally, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Admiral Zethkar. Or should I say, Governor Zethkar now?" "Just Zethkar, please."